In fact, I wonder what those thoughts are that you have to work really, really hard to suppress. I would bet that if I went into your search histories, I could find what some of those thoughts are. Yeah, I'll leave them there, man. It's funny how there's some jeering at, oh my God, but those of you who reacted, you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, not you, but your friends. It's different. Why? Because everybody has those thoughts. And so you get social feedback from people about what's permissible and, of course, what's not. But whether it's permissible or not, those thoughts are still there. In fact, the less permissible they are, the more suppressed that they get. That's the whole idea behind the purge. Now, once a year, you get to go out there, act out, and all of your worst inclinations, all of your worst desires can get played out in one single night. But then afterwards, you let it back in. Why? Because if you continue to suppress it, it just blows up. I'm not, defined by my worst behavior. You're not defined that way, but it certainly contributes to the definition. No one word is a definition. But one word on top of another word on top of another word contributes to a definition. And all of those things define who you are, how you behave, how you act out, the kinds of ideas that you indulge in. How many of you, don't raise your hands, but to me that's worth thinking about. How many will hear that and say, oh my God, that's terrible, but inside you're laughing, or inside you think it's funny? I wonder how many of you will hear that and go, oh wow, there's a much deeper point that's being made by that. Just like Jonathan Swift when he wrote A Modest Proposal, when he proposed the exact same thing 300 years ago. And his whole point to it was just eat the poor people. Why? Well, because they're just poor people. But what should be our natural reaction to that? That's terrible though, they're people. Oh, so they're people, yeah. Well then maybe we should stop treating them like a problem and start treating them like actual human beings. And some people will hear that and they'll understand the bigger point. Smaller minds tend to get really angry about stuff like that because they don't see the bigger picture. But that's exactly the point of it. Except in the case of Adrian, who really just wants to eat homeless people and Domino's Pizza. And most likely homeless people on Domino's Pizza. But I wonder how much of this we could fill up with some of your darkest thoughts, terrible parts. Now the lightness is easy to fill. Like if I were to ask you guys, what are you? What are some of your characteristics? Oh, I like sports, and I wonder if I were to ask you guys, how many of you are nice? Oh yeah, I'm very nice, and I'm very kind, and I'm very respectful, and blah blah blah. And yet, oh yeah, exactly, just like me. And also my language is pristine, but no one has shown me their playlists yet. But all of these things right here, I'm these things I show the world. And yet, if I were to connect you to a machine, I wonder what those darkest thoughts of yours would be. Those intrusive thoughts. In fact, I wonder what those thoughts are that you have to work really, really hard to suppress. I would bet that if I went into your search histories, I could find what some of those thoughts are. Yeah, I'll leave them there, man. It's funny how there's some jeering at, oh my God, but those of you who reacted, you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, not you, but your friends. It's different. Why? Because everybody has those thoughts. How do you know what it is that you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say? Well, you get feedback. There's two things going on. First off, you get feedback. You walk out in public and you go, hey guys, I got an idea. Let's eat homeless people. And then some people are like, oh my God, it's terrible. In fact, the overwhelming majority of people are like, it's terrible, you can't. And then you learn, maybe I shouldn't say that then. Maybe there's a couple of people who are like laughing, going, yeah. Now you've also learned something. That with certain people you can say something like that. But you get social feedback from people. And so you get social feedback from people about what's permissible and, of course, what's not. But whether it's permissible or not, those thoughts are still there. In fact, the less permissible they are, the more suppressed that they get. Those are, I'm sure some of you guys like the Purge movies. That's the whole idea behind the Purge. Now, once a year, you get to go out there, act out, and all of your worst inclinations, all of your worst desires can get played out in one single night. But then afterwards, you let it back in. Why? Because if you continue to suppress it, it just blows up. And you see it blow up in a lot of really almost mundane ways. I was talking to first period about this example. If you're the kind of a person, for example, who gets really angry and you say, well, yeah, I'm sorry, forget that. You get really angry and you punch a wall. Forget about saying something. But you're that person who gets so angry, you lash out, you throw things, you punch a wall. And then afterwards, when someone's talking to you, you say, oh my God, that's not me. I would never do that. I don't know why I did that. There's a really obvious reason that you did it. Because it is you. But I'm not defined by my worst behavior. You're not defined that way, but it certainly contributes to the definition. No one word is a definition. Hold on, I'm talking. No one word is a definition, but one word on top of another word on top of another word contributes to a definition. And all of those things define who you are, how you behave, how you act out, the kinds of ideas that you indulge in. And so you get angry, you punch a wall, and then you fall back and say, no, I would never do that. That's not who I am. That's exactly who you are under those circumstances, with that going on, with that person, with everything else in your life going on. And the more that you try to say, but that's not me, then the more it is that you're denying this darker part of yourself. There are more formal words for this. You call that dark part of yourself the shadow part of yourself. And you can call that light part of yourself the persona. And the word persona itself means a mask. This is the mask that you show the world. These are the things that you pretend to be, or that you present yourself to be, or that you brag that you are. And it's very much like putting on any other kind of a mask. Like, talking in first period, like, who was it? You were saying that there's a mask that you wear with at school, so you put on this one mask. And then as soon as you walk out in the hallways after the bell rings, you put on this other mask that you wear. And that's the mask that you wear with your friends. Of course, there's the thing that you really are. And by the way, most of these masks are designed to cover up who you really are. Because to face who you really are is very difficult. Because it's where truth lies. And this is where most people try to avoid the truth about life. They try to avoid the truth about who they are. So then they go out and they hang out with a different group of friends. They have a different mask for that. And then they have a different mask for when they get home with their families. Now, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different personalities, plus the one that you really are. And there's probably more than just those 4. And now you've got a condition that we might call multiple personality disorder. You've got anxieties, you have depression, you have a lot of things that go along with comorbidities that go along with that process of trying to mask who you really are and trying to present who you think you're supposed to be. And it's difficult to keep those masks square. And the more you try to suppress it, like anything else, the more pressure you create. And eventually that pressure just pops off, explodes. And then that's when we find out who you really are. So does that mean that you are the dark part of yourself? Yeah. You're the shadow? Uh-huh. And are you the persona? Mm-hmm. That too, because it's the things that you do. You're also the things that you do. So you're the persona and the shadow? Yeah, of course. Of course. But the more that you keep these things separate, the more they're at war with each other. And then the more you have to worry about being found out. That's what I was asking earlier about, like, you're saying that there's a professional face that we show. Well, who decides what professional is? And doesn't that really depend on, was that? Yeah. And of course, if you depend on society, just like if you depend on others for your affirmation, well then I suppose that means something to you. But if you're strong enough to not need that kind of affirmation, none of that matters. Isn't it funny if you ever go to like Elon Musk? The guy runs 3 corporations, with professional corporations. Have you ever seen that guy behave? Does that guy behave professionally? No. It's interesting. Almost no CEO I've ever met, certainly no entrepreneur I've ever known, ever behaves this way. This is a way that we try to conform people to a certain image by trying to get them to deny half of who they are, that persona. So the process, therefore, is this. Take your persona, take your shadow, and you individuate. You go through and you acknowledge what you are. And what are you? Are you somebody who thinks about murder, or are you someone who thinks about sports? Mm-hmm. A person who wants to eat homeless people? Maybe not, but something like that. Or are you kind and respectful? Yeah, probably both. always across the board, but you're different things at different times because you're a human being and you're complex. But understand what that also tells you. When you're different things at different times, there's a reason that you wear a certain mask with certain people. Because wearing the same mask and wearing the actual real face makes you vulnerable. If someone doesn't like this persona, that's okay. It's not really you anyway. They can criticize it all they want. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not really you. Someone doesn't like your other persona, same thing. And so these aren't really personas. These aren't really so much masks as they are shields to protect you from the thing that you're trying to shield yourself against, which is to be seen for what you really are. All of these things. And there are no exceptions. We are all of these things. And by the way, this doesn't just have to be evil thoughts. We tend to think of it that way, but this could be insecurities, doubts, mental health issues, traumas. It could be a lot of different things. It isn't just evil. And it isn't even just evil, and it isn't even just like bad things. It's also the stuff that you just try to shield away to keep the world from seeing. Because again, any effort to show the world who you really are makes you vulnerable to the world. And that's the thing that frightens people so much. It's just about being vulnerable. Because the vulnerable thing that gets attacked is real. And that's the real essence of you. So what do you do again? Individuate. You can see this, by the way. Any of you guys watch the Marvel movies? Yeah. There's a character who's like this. There's a real character, and then, persona. And then they have this other alternate side of themselves, which is just like angry, screaming, smashes building, picks up Loki and smashes him. Anybody who's this? Yeah, Hulk. And when Banner takes that, there's Bruce Banner, guy with 7 PhDs, and then there's the Hulk, which are completely opposite of one another. And then in the last movie, they individuate. He's the exact, it's him with all of his characteristics. Why? Because sometimes you do need this monster. And sometimes you do need this persona. It's like I've said before, if someone comes through that room, comes that door shooting, I hope some of you guys here are monsters. Because we're going to need a monster in that situation. If you're sitting in the way back corner, you can afford to be a diplomat, maybe. Because they've gone through everybody else. And once they get to there, maybe you can start to negotiate. But first things first, you need a monster to stop a monster. You have to be able to unleash this, but also able to rein it in. I think I've talked about that. I feel terrible for some of you guys who are growing up in a culture where we're being told that like your highest virtue is to be completely harmless. But I hope that all of you realize that none of you are actually harmless. You're all capable of terrible, terrible, terrible things. It's just whether or not you've considered it and you've acknowledged it about yourself. Over the college, I always ask this question in the first week of, I teach like an abnormal psychology thing. In the first week of classes, I always ask them, imagine yourself living in 1930s Germany. I wonder how many of you believe that you could have been a concentration camp guard. And you could have done the things that those guards did. You could have carried out a genocide. You could have burned babies. You could have flipped the switch in the gas chambers. When someone says, no, I would never, I could never, I would suggest to you that you probably don't know yourself very well. Because a lot of people, overwhelmingly, people went along with it. They did it. There were a couple who avoided it, but think about what it would have cost you to not. It would have meant you died for sure, no doubt. Your family probably also, friends around you. It was just easier to give into the pressure of just going along with it and doing it. But that means that you're capable of terrible harm. But now that's good, because that means that now you can be a truly light figure, a truly good figure, because a good person is not a person who refrains from doing evil. A good person is a person who's capable of doing evil and then chooses to do good instead. But, having said that, is capable of doing harm when necessary. If you can't do harm, you're not good. You're just there. You're like a rabbit running around. So be capable of doing harm. Be aware that you're capable of it, and then choose to do good instead. That's the light side of it. Because everyone's a moon, as he says. We have a dark side, which we never show anybody. But sometimes we still see it. It'll pop out. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Neato. Happy Monday.